Okay, tell me what comes to your mind when you see two flowers knocking against each other, or a girl very daintily lifting her foot while hugging a boy, or a bride with a glass of milk. I can see smiles, and I know that three-letter word has popped in all your minds, sex. But we cannot use this word openly in a public space, let alone a school environment. You know, for generations, the Indian films have used these euphemisms for sex. In fact, the world over, the birds and the bees have been used to symbolize a talk on sex education. Why do we use these euphemisms? Why aren't we comfortable saying the word sex out aloud? Let me ask you, how long do you think has sex existed in our country? 100 years? 500? Yeah, so obviously since mankind has been there, we've had sex. So that would be, what, millions of years? And in all these millions of years, we still haven't become comfortable talking about sex on our dinner table. Now that's something to think about. Forget talking about sex. We don't even talk about our bodies. Parents don't teach their children the right term for their genitals. All the parts of the body are given the right terms except the genitals, which are given pet names. This is your nunnu, this is your pee-pee or your wee-wee. And because y'all have not been equipped with the right term, y'all call it your MP, or the main part. Why do we have these hesitations? Why can't we call a spade a spade? And it's not as if sex does not exist in our country, right? I mean, going by our population, it not only exists, it flourishes. But as far as kids are concerned, sex does not exist. Sex is a national secret. In fact, going by the rejection of sex education the world over, I think sex is a global secret. So if sex is a national secret, how do parents in India talk to their children about sex? Or how do they answer their questions about sex? So let's take an example. If a child asks his parents, what are sanitary napkins? In my time, we'd be ticked off for asking a dirty question. But you millennials are lucky. When you ask your parents what are sanitary napkins, they give you an answer. They tell you, sanitary napkins are adult diapers. Wow. In my time, when we asked how are babies created, we were ticked off for asking dirty questions. But sometimes if our parents were progressive, they gave us the answer. They said, "Bacche to upar wale ki deen hai. Babies are God's gifts." But you millennials are lucky. When you ask your parents how babies are created, they give you an answer. They tell you. You know, when couples get married, they exchange a special hug and babies are created. How cute. But sometimes these cute, so-called cute answers by parents can backfire. A young boy of 9 saw his mom hiding something inside her drawer, and it turned out to be sanitary napkins. And on inquiring, she told him that these are napkins. So he wanted to use them. So she told him, she was very embarrassed, and she said, no, these are napkins for special occasions. A week later, she came out of the kitchen laden with a tray of snacks to find her son distributing these napkins for special occasions to the guests. See, we can all laugh about it because it's a very cute story. But sometimes wrong information given by parents can take a very serious and negative turn. A 4-year-old girl told her teacher rather, that my uncle wants to eat my cookie and I don't like it. The teacher scolded her. Teacher told her that, you should learn to share. And it's okay to share your cookie with your uncle. Unknown to the teacher, Cookie was the name this girl's parents had given her for her genitals. When will we call a spade a spade? When? I'm sure this girl's parents never imagined in their wildest dream that a term they gave her for her genitals could lead to this kind of a problem. And I don't really blame them because a lot of people in my generation grew up without any sex education. So though we want to talk to our kids, we are embarrassed. We are awkward about talking to the youth about sex education. We don't even know what is sex education. We are scared of sex education. So I ask you, youth, what makes you think, why are the adults scared of sex education? Why don't your parents talk to you? Why don't schools organize regular sex education programs? What is it about sex education that scares them? Is it resistance to sex education, or is it resistance to the prefix sex before education? In fact, to a lot of people, they don't even see this word as a whole. Sex education, only the word sex gets magnified. And the word education, which is so important, right next to it becomes invisible. And that's the reason they junk the entire concept of sex education, because they think that sex education is a talk on sex with children. Actually, that is far from the truth. Sex education is a vast field. So if you're learning the right terms for your genitals, that is sex ed. If you're learning about the safe and unsafe does, that is sex education. Of course, a talk on puberty, physical, emotional changes, that is sex education. And obviously, a talk on reproduction and the sexual act is sex education. But it does not stop there. It goes beyond that. So if you're understanding the concept of LGBTQ and learning to be inclusive, that is sex education. If you're learning about changing relationship and learning to cope with interpersonal relationships, that is sex education. If you understand the concept that using terms like rape and banging somebody are not appropriate, that is sex education. Gender sensitization, empathy, respect for self and others, and handling relationships responsibly, that is all sex education. So basically, when you give sex education to a child, you are equipping the child with skills to lead a healthy and safe and responsible life with a very, very positive attitude. Now, because parents don't understand what sex education means, obviously, they worry about the impact of sex education on children. Oh, sex education will take away the innocence of my child. It will put thoughts in my child's mind which are not there. Tell me something, did your parents hand you the encyclopedia before you knew how to read alphabets? Learning is always incremental. Sex education is also incremental. You first talk about the bodies, the difference in the bodies, the different kind of touches before you move on to other things as you grow up. So sex education, like any other kind of education, is pure knowledge. And knowledge never takes away the innocence. It only takes away ignorance. Growing up, did all of you listen to the story of the Sleeping Beauty? I think the world over, the parents must have read this beautiful story to their children about how this prince came and he kissed the beautiful princess and freed her from a curse. Now let me give you a different perspective. This strange man enters a strange home, enters the bedroom of this girl and kisses her while she's sleeping. Sleeping Beauty is a tale of sexual abuse. And we parents have been feeding you these stories since childhood, without realizing what we are teaching you, romanticizing these incidents of sexual abuse and making them acceptable. Sometimes wrong information can be worse than no information. I remember I was 11 when my cousin told me that if you dance with boys, you'll get pregnant. I freaked out. Because just a day back, I had gone to my cousin's house for her birthday party and I had danced with her friend. For a week, I worried, I cried, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I didn't want to go to school. And finally, I broke down on the dinner table and told my parents, I'm pregnant. They collapsed, not with shock, but with laughter. But I still remember the trauma of that 11-year-old me who believed what my cousin told me, that if you dance with boys, you'll get pregnant. Sometimes, not knowing can also be worse than knowing. I am 14 years old, and I still haven't started my periods while all my friends have. Is that okay? I've started to develop breasts. Hey, but I'm a boy. Is that normal? I've had unprotected sex with my girlfriend. Is that going to lead to STD? Can she take an emergency pill? You know, I had oral sex with my boyfriend. Is that going to lead to pregnancy? I don't like girls. Does that mean I'm gay? There are so many questions and confusions in the mind of youth and children today. And that leads to anxiety, and it leads to lack of concentration, and it impacts the academic performance of children. So why not give them sex education? Why not give them the right information about their body so that they lead a more comfortable and relaxed life? A mother called me last week and told me that her daughter came back from school, very excited, 10-year-old daughter, and she said, Mom, I started my periods in school. And I knew what to do. I got a pad from the clinic and I used it. And before her mother could react, she grabbed the phone from her mother's hand, called up her dad, and said, Hey, Dad, there's good news. I started my periods and we need to celebrate. We have to go out for dinner tonight. This mother had tears in her eyes. She couldn't thank me enough. Her daughter had attended a puberty workshop last month, and she said she was thanking me for the positivity we had created in her daughter's life, the ease with which she accepted such a big change in her life and was willing to celebrate that change and talk so openly about that change. When we prepare a child for what's to come beforehand, when you know different concepts which you're going to face as you grow up, obviously it will lead to a calmer and composed you. Research the world over, and this research has been done multiple times the world over, it proves that sex education, age-appropriate sex education, makes a child more responsible, delay experimentation, be safe when experimenting, and also leads to gender sensitization and a responsible behavior. When there are so many benefits to sex education, why are you youth not demanding it? Knowledge about your body is your right. You need to be demanding it. You need to be demanding it of your schools. You need to be demanding it of your parents. Please do that. I remember when my son was growing up, he had 101 questions about a whole lot of things. I wanted to give him the right answer because I flashed back to the 11-year-old me who had grown up with the trauma of not knowing. But there were no resources available at that point of time which could give me information which I could share with him in a very, very child-friendly manner. So I said, okay, I'm a writer. I will create these resources. So I went and studied. I qualified myself. I got my certification as a sex educator. I quit a very lucrative job as a copywriter, and I started my company, Taboo, which is devoted to sex education. It's been 8 years, and we've been providing and promoting sex education. The journey has not been easy. I was rejected. My work was rejected. I was ridiculed. I was made fun of. Cheap comments were cracked at me. Even my sons bore the brunt of it at times. But it didn't deter me from my path. Actually, there was no path. I created one as I went along. And I created very interesting formats to make sex education acceptable and interesting. And today I'm very, very proud to state that Taboo is the only company in the world which provides multiple formats like workshops, talks, blogs, music videos, plays, books, columns, and even stand-up comedy to promote and provide sex education. You know, as your youth grow up, there are multiple questions you'll face about your bodies, your sexuality, sexual behavior, relationships, and the decisions you take today will impact your health and well-being for the rest of your life. I picked up the baton of responsibility to provide tools to the youth to help them lead a healthy and responsible life. Will you, the youth, now pick up that baton? Will you untaboo sex education? The change has to come from you. Begin at home. Go home today and have these conversations with your parents. Ask your mom about her crushes. Ask her how she handled it. Speak to your dad about periods. Talk to him about the myths which are surrounding periods at home and society. Explain the concept of LGBTQ to your grandparents. And figure out an age-appropriate way to talk to your younger sibling about all these concepts. Open conversations, break the wall of silence. I know, to begin with, there might be awkwardness, but you have to move beyond the awkwardness. You have to make the uncomfortable comfortable. Because if you don't do that, sex will always be a national secret, and the youth will suffer. Remember, sex education is not the villain. The lack of it is. So untaboo sex education and help create a very safe and responsible India.